This week, Josh Copeland joins us from AT&T to talk about getting into a cybersecurity career. Then, a bit out of order, we dive into the enterprise security news. Google Cloud drops $50 million on cyber reason, but don't call it funding. Black Kite, another security rating score startup, raises $22 million. Query AI raises $15 million to make SOAR and XDR easier. Valence, not sure how to say that. The latest wild venture startup comes out of stealth with $7 million in seed. Tenchi and Tenacity raise $3 million seeds to solve cloud security challenges. Help System acquires Fish Labs, yet another Help Systems acquisition this year. Elastic acquires Optimize, Halvar Flake's latest company. Leading indicators of a great cybersecurity program, and CrowdStrike creates a new XDR standard. Finally, Adam Janofsky, founding director of The Record, joins us to talk about insights from interviewing actual cyber criminals from well-known ransomware crews. It's a really, really interesting interview. Highly recommend checking that one out. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. When it comes to your network, visibility is imperative because you can't secure what you can't see. Riverbed's network performance management solution gives you 100% network visibility 100% of the time. Now you can resolve performance issues and security threats up to 90% faster and reduce response time, damage, and cost spent on remediation and containment efforts. Connect with Riverbed today and learn how their NPM solution can protect your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Riverbed. Whether your biggest cybersecurity concern is ransomware, unprotected network devices, zero trust success, or auditing your supply chains, firmware security is critical. Eclipsium's enterprise firmware security platform helps you identify devices and their firmware, verify the integrity of firmware wherever it's used, and fortify firmware throughout active remediation and automated patching. Visit securityweekly.com/Eclipsium to try out Eclipsium or learn more about enterprise firmware security.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Chicken and Waffles Day. This is episode 247, recorded on Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is Mr. Paul Asadorian, who has recently added soldering to his list of skills that make him dangerous and not to be trifled with. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I'd use the term skill loosely in that context.
Yeah, I know. I intentionally put you on the spot with that one.
I think you could say like I can melt stuff. That's really
yeah. With great power.
Yes, not necessarily the right things get melted though.
With really high soldering iron temperatures.
Yes,
you can mess things up or fix them. Also joining me is Mr. Tyler Shields, who also has a particular set of skills and is back from Vegas.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm yellow. The particular set of skills you're talking about were not on display in Vegas. I lost my shirt, so that was not a good result. But thanks for bringing up painful wounds, Adrian.
Yeah, no problem. And on top of that, you apparently have an issue with jaundice.
Yes. Well, we were working on the color issues, and I looked like I was going to vomit because I was blue, and now apparently I'm yellow, so I got to get a new camera. We'll figure this out.
Or seek medical help.
Yeah, that might help too. Well, I need that for other reasons.
All right, InfoSec World 2021 is proud to
Adrian,
announce
you forgot Dimitri's here with us in studio.
Oh, shoot. Yes. Yeah, sorry. I didn't factor that into my script. Hello, Dimitri.
Hello.
Awkward pause.
No, that's okay.
Joining us
awkward pausing is fine.
For SOC Analyst Appreciation Day, we've been doing yoga, entertained by a comedian. It's actually been a really fun day at work.
Yeah. Ladders. Mm-hmm. We're talking about ladders.
And what's ironic, there's been a ladder here in the studio the entire time. And Mark French was here talking about security ladders.
Yeah, that was fun.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I caught some of that, and it's some really good stuff. Yeah, I think what we're going to talk about in this segment is going to hopefully complement what y'all talked about on the ladder segment, because that seemed to be more about after you've gotten the job, what those different career paths can be like and what the different jobs are like. And hopefully we're not overlapping at all talking about getting into it in the first place.
No, I think it'll complement really well. Excellent.
All right, a few announcements. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's event. Hear from Robert Urjavec, plus heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners save 20% on digital pass registration. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register now. Also, starting the week of October 25th, we will be live streaming Paul's Security Weekly today on Wednesdays. So we're switching. So Wednesday nights from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern is going to be Paul's Security Weekly, and this show, Enterprise Security Weekly, is moving to Thursday afternoons. So a little bit later, one day later in the week, from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. You can view our live stream schedule anytime at securityweekly.com/live.
I think it's the culmination, Adrian. Just a quick note on that of a bunch of changes we've made on the network. Adrian being the primary host of this show. Josh Marpet has come over to Paul Security Weekly, culminates in the schedule change. So we played like some fantasy football with Security Weekly hosts.
and we've just determined Thursdays are just horrible. So I can't even watch Paul Security, at least some of the segments, because we've got our B-Sides Knoxville planning session.
Yeah,
then.
So many things on Thursdays. So
yeah. So hopefully that frees up some more hosts to be on Paul Security Weekly more often, and frees up more people's Thursday evenings.
Yes.
All right, today's interview, we are talking about entry-level jobs in cybersecurity. And like today's entire SOC Analyst Appreciation live stream, it is sponsored by Devo. Joining us is Mr. Josh Copeland, SOC Director at AT&T. Josh retired from the U.S. Air Force in 2018 and has over 20 years of experience in IT and security. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. And we both have to be careful because we've got about the same time in, I suspect most of the hosts on have around the same time in both IT and security. And there are many rabbit holes we can find ourselves going down.
Oh, absolutely. It's a landmine of rabbit holes.
Yeah. Since today's topic is starting out in security, let's start with that, Josh. How did you get into security? And maybe IT also, if that factors into the path that you took.
For me, I actually kind of fell into it. I was kind of the nerdy guy. My original job in the Air Force was logistics, doing supply stuff, so moving boxes, aircraft parts, things of that nature. And they just needed someone to do computer stuff. So I kind of started doing that and eventually rolled into all things cyber.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty common one. You recognize that you're the person people reach to set VCR clocks and figure out how those computers work, and it's just you're stuck in it from then on.
I wouldn't say stuck. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Sure. We would have switched if we didn't enjoy it, but it's those of us that can turn computers to our bidding. It is a good feeling, being able to troubleshoot and figure things out. For some people, they just have no patience for that. So there are tons of cybersecurity job openings, we've noticed, and this is something we've talked about before, out there at a certain level. It seems like, sure, there's tons of jobs out there, but they all require 3 to 5 years of experience. And, Josh, I think a lot of us here mentor folks on a regular basis. And I know I've got several folks trying to get their first job in security, and they just can't find it. There's not a whole lot of junior roles, not a whole lot of entry-level roles. So a lot of these folks find themselves asking, where do I get that 3 to 5? Where do I get that initial 3 to 5 so I can, apply for some of these mid-level roles? So, I think that's an interesting place to start. Is and as we've talked about today, today's SOC Analyst Appreciation Day, that has turned into kind of the entry level, or one of the most common entry level fields into security. So I think the first big question there is, should security be entry level? And I think this does kind of get into that ladders conversation, where he's talking about the importance and the value of understanding the business, understanding other roles within IT and within security, how important some of that background is.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm one of those folks that I subscribe that cybersecurity is not a true entry level role. There's an entry level position within cybersecurity, but you probably should have a really good background in IT as a whole before getting in there, because if you don't know what it is, how do you know how to secure it? There are paths for people to go directly from college directly into cybersecurity roles, but that would be the narrow path versus the wider path of cross flowing in.
Yeah, and I imagine there's more IT jobs anyway, and depending on what IT job you pick, that can kind of change your direction into security. If you start out as a developer, for example, or a software engineer, you could find yourself taking more of an AppSec route, maybe going into DevOps, something like that, before you end up specializing in security, versus the more systems engineer route, where maybe you're a sysadmin or a network admin or a DevOps engineer or a cloud engineer is a fairly entry level role that I've seen a lot of these days.
Yeah, cloud is absolutely changing the game. It's taking things that used to be very, very separate roles of networking and sysad and identity management, and kind of all melding them into one. And is a great point to kind of transition into security, because you're doing all those basic level security functions while you're doing all of your traditional IT roles.
Yeah. So, again, talking about certifications and degrees, how do you feel about there's so many degree programs for cyber these days. It seems like universities and colleges and community colleges are spinning these out like crazy. What would you recommend, maybe from somebody transitioning from the IT side in, or somebody trying to come in directly, for just starting out?
College degrees are a great way to demonstrate long-term proficiency, long-term, project management. The best degrees that you're going to find are the ones that absolutely focus on hands-on proficiency. The ones that are going to take you through actually doing things versus the, theory that you tend to get in a lot of more academic-based programs that are more geared towards the PhD route versus the frontline get into the working field.
And it seems like I see a lot of folks, and I have met and worked with a lot of folks that have come into InfoSec through the military. So that it seems like an interesting path also, especially if you did something with intelligence in the military, and then you've got your kind of standard IT roles within the military as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. The military is a great way to get into IT and into cybersecurity, particularly. A lot of the things that we have as baseline cybersecurity roles, rules, and frameworks are all based out of things that were developed by DoD for DoD. So the DoD does a really good job developing their cyber force, bringing them up, training them through, from absolutely knowing nothing to being a security expert in their field with the appropriate training, education, and certifications.
Yeah. Yeah, and they'll pay for a lot of that stuff too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Between actual tuition assistance while you're in, GI Bill, programs like Cool for certifications, it absolutely sets you up for success.
So you mentioned the more practical stuff, the certifications that make you actually use some of the skills, prove that you have some of these skills. What are some of the other activities or things that you would recommend for people to try and get some of these skills prior to getting a job in InfoSec? I know one idea that I've had is to either do contract work or work pro bono for maybe small businesses that couldn't otherwise afford a security person, help them out with their stuff. And, I think that's something you could potentially put on a resume and show that you have some experience, and more importantly, give you experience that comes out when you interview. When somebody asks you a question, you've actually put hands on Office 365, and made Office 365 more secure, or QuickBooks, or whatever that small business needs. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there to get that experience without landing like a big corporate job in InfoSec. But I'm curious if there's any in particular, like building a home lab, or some of the stuff I'm talking about that you've seen work.
Oh, absolutely. One of the questions I routinely ask when we're doing requests for interviews is, what do you have on your network? What's your home lab look like? Because that tells me kind of how interested you really are into building your skill set. Doing CTFs, there's dozens of them out there. Some are really focused towards SOC, some are just focused towards the more pen test type of stuff, but they provide that you're doing actual skill sets. And you're absolutely spot on with doing potentially pro bono work or low dollar work for particularly things like nonprofits who aren't going to have the huge budget that a regular corporate is going to have, but still have a very, very high need for that expertise. So that's kind of a win-win where you're able to give a nonprofit some expertise, build your resume, and come out ahead.
So it sounds like somebody having a home lab is almost a foregone conclusion when you interview somebody. Like you expect that.
Yeah, if they don't have a home lab, I'm kind of internally concerned of how serious you are about this. I'm a firm believer that if you're in cybersecurity, it is not a 9-to-5 job. You might work 9 to 5, but you're kind of constantly always on looking for what the new threat, the new hotness is in tools, techniques, and all those things that realm within the cybersecurity world.
It's actually how I got a contributing factor to me getting my first job in InfoSec was I brought a picture of my home lab to the interview. And nice. When they asked how I knew NFS, I said, "Oh yeah, I set that up at home." And they're like, "Wait, what? What do you mean at home?" Like,
you just slide a picture across the desk.
I took over my, the living room in your house. I was telling Chris Hadnagi this on the Social Engineering podcast. The room in your house where no one's supposed to sit in any of the furniture. In my house where I was living at the time with my mom, that room was massive. And there wasn't even much furniture in it. So I'm like, this is a great place for a server rack. And I took a picture of it and I brought it on my interview. And I got the job.
And let me guess, your cabling on that server rack was one of those cable racks from hell.
Yes, it was a right line rack, which wasn't great for cable management.
Yeah, and so I'm sure, I'm sure early on, like we were swapping stuff. I had racks in my home lab when I was first coming in too. Gosh, I had 2 or 3 racks full of gear in my home labs, and you're always constantly unplugging, moving stuff around, inserting new stuff. So you don't even worry about cable management. It's just the cabling nightmare.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember how I set up my home lab. Before I got into IT, was I registered a domain name and I decided I was going to run my own website and run my own email. I figured if I ran my own email, like I need that to work. That's how I'm communicating with everybody else. That would really push me to kind of understand the importance of uptime and what it's like to keep something updated and functioning correctly.
Yeah, I ran mine not for the email, although I did that. I ran it more to have insulation when I bounced through it to attack external third-party systems, so that I was the admin that they contacted to track down that wily hacker. Oh yeah, I don't know who that guy is. He must have got into my system.
Yeah, I remember I used this really neat front end, and that was kind of a cool thing about it is like I had this PHP front end called Squirrel Mail. And it had this plugin system, and you could build in all these neat plugins into it, and that was even today that was something nice that I kind of miss, like the ability to change that experience and modify that for myself. Though, today it's hard to make the argument that it's worth the time and effort to run that myself. But still, gave me those skills, that gave me the confidence to go into that interview and talk about that kind of stuff. So I've got a good what I think is a good hot seat question here for everybody. Josh, I'll let you go first. So learn to code or not learn to code? Is it essential for cybersecurity or not? Because we certainly have people that are on both sides of that debate.
I'm kind of on it depends. I was not a coder growing up through my IT career. I know just enough to be dangerous and do the things that I need to do for the tools that I use. But I do believe that being able to code is a valuable skill and will help you in the long run.
Paul?
Yeah, I think you have to have some level of familiarity with code. Not saying you've got to be a full-fledged software engineer, but understanding the basics of scripting and programming is essential. I think really for any role, you should have some experience with some type of programming language.
Yeah, I would agree with Paul fully on that one. I think you have to have some experience, and programming is such a overloaded term, right? It could be as basic as scripting, right? Just scripting experience, and use that as
exactly.
program. You don't necessarily need to know how to code assembly language or C# or C++, but having at least some scripting experience, and then as you move up the stack beyond network and infrastructure style roles, it becomes more and more imperative to understand how applications are built, put together, how to code them, create them, et cetera, because you're going to be looking for attacks that are much higher up the chain than just writing and detecting packets and things at that level. So I would argue the further you go in cyber, the more it becomes necessary from a SOC analyst standpoint.
I also think there's scripting. I agree totally with you, Tyler, about the notion of what the overloaded term programming. I think there's also the notion of a lot of the interconnectedness you need between tools today in terms of passing data, refining data. You need to be able to understand APIs, how to pass data. So whether you call that heavy-duty scripting, whether you call it programming, I think that's an essential skill you need to have to be able to really force multiply the data you have today.
So I have a follow-on hot seat question, Adrian, if you'll allow me.
I'll allow it.
You'll allow it? Okay, good. So I have this theory that the future of SOC analyst is becoming security engineer or SOC engineer. And what I mean by that is, we traditionally have had SOC analyst roles, where it's consumption of data, understanding data, and doing a lot of the human processes that are required of a SOC analyst because of the elevated intelligence required, right? The human layer of intelligence required on top of what we can create. As we get closer and closer to AI, as we get closer and closer to true ML, to smart systems, we're taking some of the more rote day-to-day SOC activities and giving them away to automation systems, which allows the human being involved to not be displaced, because there's such a need for that human being, but to elevate their level of kind of what they're consuming and what they're able to analyze, right, as an analyst. And to really kind of elevate that role, do we have to start to really look towards SOC analysts as becoming engineers? Meaning, okay, it's one thing to read some data and make a call. It's something else to say, hey, I know that if I can connect this system to this system to this system and have that data transferred around and analyzed amongst those systems, it becomes an automated task, making everything better. Is that the future of the SOC analyst as they move up in ranks and get higher up in the food chain?
Josh, what do you think?
I absolutely agree. The more that we bring in AI and machine learning, the more your analysts are going to start becoming content engineers. They're going to have to understand how all these pieces and parts kind of meld together and be able to write the appropriate correlation rules to make those things happen automatically.
Yeah, I think the old IT-ism, leave me alone or I'll replace you with a small shell script. I think that applies to, it always applies to somebody's job, and it just evolves over the years. And I think these days it is that first level of SOC analysts. That work that they do is the easiest and most likely to get automated, I think, in the years to come. So you can either see your job automated away, or you can be the one to do it, is the way I look at it.
Hey, I have a hot seat question real quick, if that's okay, Adrian.
Sure.
So I guess we've been talking a lot about technology. I'm curious, Josh, how you look at the softer skills of communication of, what is an issue? How do you communicate that risk to the business? Is that something you find is growing in importance? How does that work?
Soft skills are always going to be important because it doesn't matter how great of a technician, a SOC analyst, or an engineer you are. If you can't explain that to the business side of the house, you're never going to get any forward traction. Security is one thing, but explaining to the business how security is a return on investment is the crux of being able to do the things that you need to do as a security engineer.
Yeah. And one last question I've got for Josh. Anybody else who's ever been a mentor to someone or worked with mentees, where do we find we struggle the most with mentees? Because I think for me, I'll just go ahead and answer the question first. I think almost every time I mentor somebody, I have to kind of shift their expectations from what they think is important or not important to study to get into the industry, and what they think hiring managers are going to care about when they get hired.
You're absolutely spot on. A lot of time it's expectation management. Everyone wants to go do red team stuff because it's the new hot, interesting thing that everyone wants to do. But the job market for red team is super small and super specialized. Blue side or purple is wide open. There are lots of jobs everywhere. Everyone needs defenders. So getting them to kind of maybe switch their understanding of go do this over here first, get the experience, and then rotate and pivot into a red team role. While it's not the path you necessarily want, it's going to be the path that gets you to where you want.
Yeah, good advice. And to wrap things up here, I do want to mention that if you go check out the show notes, if you go to securityweekly.com/ESW 247, Josh and I have put together a PDF, and there's a link there for it, kind of starting a cybersecurity career cheat sheet that you can download that has a bunch of our kind of curated recommendations and resources. So there were just so many of them. I decided instead of mentioning them on the call and having people have to open tabs and, go check things out, we just kind of compile them into a one-pager PDF there. So you can find that on the show notes, securityweekly.com/ESW 247. And Josh, thank you for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been good stuff.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.